Welcome to the show, Jen Minella. How are you?
I am fantastic.
Not just good, but fantastic.
Yes. I've regained my
Fantastic to
voice
hear.
because I lost my voice this morning, so we're in good shape now.
Okay, so we are good to actually have this webinar.
Yes.
Excellent.
I practiced like miming so I can pantomime if I lose my voice again.
Yeah. Can you show just a couple of mime moves?
Yeah. Yeah. How'd I do?
That's surprisingly good, man. You actually did practice them, didn't you? That's your am I muted mime or something like that,
Oh.
right? Um, but I will, since this is an official webinar, I will share my screen and show PowerPoint slides. How about that? Not just those Google slides, not that none of that modern crap. It's PowerPoint time. Welcome to the webinar. Today on the show, Jen Minella as our guest star, as well as Gerber Ala and Andrew featuring Miranda, both off camera. Jerry, how are you since you're on camera?
I'm doing pretty well. My voice is also a little scratchy, so maybe it's because JJ and I were hanging out recently. Probably picked something up in travels, but yeah, I'm doing pretty well.
That's right. You went to North Carolina, didn't
I
you?
was in North Carolina last week. Yeah,
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 Raleigh area, right?
yeah.
RTP.
Yes, good old Research Triangle Park.
Yeah, and I have to
Excellent.
tell you, you see, in true Hamina form, we're literally at dinner at this nice place with like, it's low lit, they have good food, it's where everybody goes for business meetings and stuff. And I swear, like right as soon as the main dishes got cleared out, Jerry leans over and he pops back up with his laptop, like in Hamina, ready to go, showing everybody, some of the new features that he's working on. And I'm like, first of all, where did you just pull that out of? Because I didn't see him with a bag. Apparently, he had a bag down there. But yeah, so we had
I
a
did
we
try.
had a
I was trying to be Peter.
lovely dinner.
It's a formal business meeting. I like to say like Jerry. I guess we're the same way, Jerry. And Jerry and Mia and everybody who travels with me, Andrew, they know this painfully well. But nobody escapes a conversation with me without a demo. Like it always happens. Like it's like my ex-boss Sudhir. Like nobody escapes. Without a Juniper sales pitch. When you talk to Sudhir. But it's the same with me. There's no escaping without a demo for sure. I'm glad you guys had a good time. I'm glad you guys had a good time. And I also saw Jen a few weeks ago, but you were not contagious at the time, so I'm not. I don't have this flu and stuff like that. But you did this security architect class in Prague, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah, we
Couple of
well, we did the
times.
regular 3-day training, the full architecture training, and then we also did a new like Cypher Sleuths deep dive thing where we kind of dug into Wi-Fi 7 and uncovered some nasty little cruddy bits of things that people probably need to pay attention to there. Anders was there. I just saw Bashara pop in here too. Hi guys.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Bashar was there too, but you still made it, right? Mm, I'm kidding. So if you had to summarize the course, like what are the top three lessons of the course that you had, so that people can save the money and not take your. No, I'm kidding. But what are the top three things that people learn typically on your and JD's courses?
In the full class that's delivered
Yep.
in 3 or 4 days, it's an architecture class. So it's basically everything, well, as much as we can do in 3 days that you need to know about security architecture as it relates to network infrastructure. So
Mhm.
we talk about not just, wireless over the air for security, but all the way back through the rest of the infrastructure and how that ties into compliance requirements and architecting an entire solution. I think one of my like soapbox items for the past few years has been that I think as engineers we've gotten too used to configuring products and not
Mhm.
enough in like thinking holistically and systemically and architecting solutions. So the class is really how to architect a secure solution, a appropriate level of security, right? Because there's not a single right answer.
And I like that since kind of as network engineers, like there will be less and less, I think, of their cycles going to the nitty gritty with kind of CLI exactly remembering the CLI commands will be probably playing a smaller and smaller role. There was actually a packet pushers episode also on like will LLMs replace CLIs and stuff like that. But as kind of CLI plays a smaller and smaller role, people have more and more time to dedicate on the actual architecture, which I think is a very healthy direction.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of an analogy there, like with Wi-Fi design, people are less and less drawing walls and drawing shelves because AI does that. So they're more actually doing the actual design work, which matters more.
Yeah. Focus on the important stuff.
Yeah, man, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, here's the deal, though, right? Here's Tommy, or Tommy, as we say here in Finland, Tommy Heinonen. I have worked with Tommy for I met him in 2002 when on my first day at Ekahau, and he was already a veteran in Wi-Fi locationing at the time. And here's a picture of him before he started. We're going to talk about cloud and security today, and a big part for us at Hamina is kind of getting certified so that the life of like the buyer's journey for our tools is easier, but also for us like. And we want to be like, not a couple of guys in a garage shop. We want to be a serious player in this cloud game. This is Tommy before the certification processes. Tommy was heading our ISO 27K as well as SOC 2, both SOC 2 Type 1 and Type 2. And here he is after. So people ask, like, what did you achieve out of the certifications? This is at least a couple of wrinkles and some lost hair. Certainly, I lost all of it. And if we zoom out actually from the picture, there's a trend on the last webinar. We also I was just pointing at Dan Jones, who was obviously talking to Tommy, but this is just a picture I happened to find. Apparently, all of the pictures I find are of Nicolas Cage themed clothing, because on last webinar we also had a different story with different Nicolas Cage themed clothing. Okay. Before we jump into, and we'll get there, trust us, jump into the chase. Jerry, Andrew, what's new at Hamina? Miranda, have we been to any shows lately? Is there any product news, things of that nature? No, okay, yeah, we'll go. No, Miranda almost unmuted.
I think Jerry is the best person to answer about the events that he's been very
Yeah, most recently I was at the Calyx Connections event. I'll be at WLPC in Mexico here next week. Definitely have stuff going on.
I
over the
guess
summer.
Cisco Live coming up.
Yeah.
In APAC.
That's right. Australia Cisco Live is coming up. And yeah. I've been running around, but I can't remember where I was. I was at an event last week in Tallinn, actually Tallinn, Estonia, which was an Elisa Tech Day. That was good. What about you, Andrew?
Well, we've just got back from WLPC Prague, which is the highlight of the European year for me. I was in London last week doing an in-person Hammer training with Peter McKenzie, which was just in-person training. Ireland next week, and then Utrecht the week after that for WICO, which is great little local events I love attending.
Yeah, absolutely. Amsterdam, next to Amsterdam. And Jen, where are you going next? Or do you have a class coming up? And for the security class, where should people look for your security classes?
Geez, you see, we're trying to figure out a way to do them online, but there's so much hands-on labs where we're broadcasting stuff for them to play with that we're working through that. So we are scheduling something probably Q1 here in the Raleigh area, like we did a couple of years ago.
I recall
and then
that.
of course we do put it at WLPC. So if people sign up for it, you get a great deal if you go to WLPC.
Exactly. And hey, speaking of WLPC, the WLPC voting is open, right? The speaker voting is open. So if you're at all into Wi-Fi geekery and want to effect on the presentations at WLPC, which also, even if you're not going, they will be recorded. So go to thewlpc.com. This is the biggest Wi-Fi nerd out ever for the nerdiest of the nerds when it comes to Wi-Fi. And here, choose your conference. Take Phoenix 26. And registration is open 15th of December. I got to remember that so I don't get left out. And hold on.
Yeah, go back. CFP voting.
Oh,
The other button.
There we go. Thank you, Jen. Okay, so here you can vote for your favorite presentations. So if nothing else, vote for Andrew and Jerry and Jen and myself, right? Have we all posted our talks? Jerry has. Jerry, what do you got?
The only thing I have right now is the deep dive.
Oh, excellent. So
The Hamina
attend
deep
the
dive.
Hamina deep dive. Even if you've
Yep.
attended it a year or two ago, you didn't get the AI and you didn't get the new stuff that will be out in WLPC Phoenix. It'll actually be a pretty significant February for us, actually, in terms of product launches. So you want to take the Hamina deep dive again to see the new stuff. I put in one as 7 ways to prevail as a wireless expert. So in the age of AI, how you know what's going to happen and how are we going to keep ourselves relevant? I'm sure there's 18 speakers, lots like that. So what about Jen? What do you got going for WLPC Speak?
Well, the training class, the Cipher Sleuth deep dive, and then a short presentation on basically findings from Wi-Fi 7. But specifically like Wi-Fi 7 and why all of the cryptography has changed and what that's going to mean for endpoint. So
excellent, excellent. And
yeah.
we'll get to that. You'll get to summarize that actually in a second if you don't mind.
Okay.
But before we go there, why we're here is kind of how do we merge into the cloud, and especially as we move our Wi-Fi toolkits into the cloud, like what does that mean? And here's Brian Ward in 2021 when he heard that I had started a new Wi-Fi tools company, and he thought I was completely out of my mind. Like doing Wi-Fi tools on the cloud now in this competitive landscape, not gonna happen, not gonna happen. He said. And it turns out like none of this, like I was so concerned about browser compatibility on a browser-based tool and performance and scalability and lagginess, and there really was no hardcore Wi-Fi design tool at the time, but it's worked out. And before we get to Jennifer's opening, like this is what I've noticed quite a bit. Jerry, you're seeing this too, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're using a mobile device, it's likely talking to the internet in some capacity of transferring information that you're collecting while you're on site. So yeah, even if you're not using a browser-based application, there's still a cloud component, right?
Yeah. If you're site surveying with an iPhone or an iPad, whatever the solution, you're fairly likely using the cloud today. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. Maybe you're kind of like, I'm just borderline kind of trying this cloud stuff. It's not approved by my organization. Naughty. Or actually good that you're trying it out. But yeah, that's all I'm saying. But yeah, JJ, you do a lot of things, don't you? And then you get pulled into these kind of webinars too. But was a couple of years ago you wrote a book, right?
Yes.
How's that been? And when's the next edition coming out? Or the next...
I don't know if there's a next edition.
Come on, of course, there's always a next edition.
That sucker that's 600 pages of heart and soul. I don't think I have another 600 left in me, but it was meant to have a pretty long shelf life. So it's I mean, I think we'll be, the community, we will be, creating supplemental pieces as things update, because WPA3 is updated regularly. Wi-Fi 7 is here, Wi-Fi 8's on the horizon. But the architecture component really, stays the same, and it's very modular. You just plug in, right, whatever needs to go next.
Okay, that's fair. And so what's your take? I know like compliance isn't necessarily like what you do day in, day out, but what would you what would you look at if you were merging your Wi-Fi tools to the cloud? By the way, are you using Wi-Fi tools these days anyway? And are they cloud-based
If
if
I
you
can
are?
avoid it, I don't.
Come on! That's the
But when
wrong
I
answer.
do, I have a Humina license. So when I do, it is the tool that I use.
The right answer. That's what I'm talking about. But you
Yeah.
try to stay away from them. I try that too, but I'm failing at it miserably.
Yeah.
But
But
yeah, what would you look for? Let's say as a corporation with semi-strict cloud policies, you have a legacy toolkit on desktop and you're moving to the cloud. What should you look out for?
well, I think, anytime we talk about any vendors, so application vendors, SaaS vendors, because all of the vendors that you're using are storing or processing some of your information. So then the question is, what information are they collecting, processing, storing, transmitting? How risky is that? And then what is your, level of confidence in how they're handling that data? And so while I am not an auditor, that is like, to me, that sounds like hell that I would never want to live in. But I have lots of friends that are auditors. And advising for compliance is actually a big part of what I do for organizations and for security vendors that are building products to help meet compliance requirements. And so, my daily life is with understanding all of the various data policies. I know you guys have a new one in the EU. We just got our head wrapped around GDPR. Now you've got a new EU data privacy. We've got NIS2 where there's the overarching requirement in 27 countries that have to implement their own flavor of that. In the US, of course, we have sometimes per state data privacy laws. And so it gets to be pretty complicated. But one of the things I think all organizations are thinking through right now is, supply chain risk. And so if they weren't doing it before, and I think, stuff like this to me as a, as an engineer and a technologist is boring at face value. But when you start to think about like this dance between, your relationships, your business relationships and your partnerships and who has your data and what are they doing with it, it gets to be, I mean, I've had to think a lot recently about, data security. One of the environments I'm responsible for is a federal contractor. So we're under CMMC compliance. I've been involved in helping through a few acquisitions recently where we're moving data between two organizations. And so just understanding what type of data and the impact of that data, because if you let's look at wireless for a second. A lot of people on the webinar are probably like, oh, well, who cares if somebody, gets my floor plans? Well, I got a long list of organizations who consider their floor plans without anything else added onto it as very proprietary and confidential. And we lock it up just like we would, banking information, right? Or a credit card number. So, different organizations have different requirements, and how the people that you're doing business with and the people that are taking some of your data or storing your data, it's important to understand how they're securing, and you guys, sorry, I'll stop talking in a second, but I was really impressed when
Go, man. This is gold.
I got the email about like, some of the changes in the, like as a user, because I have a paid Alumina subscription. I got the email about, updates to some of the privacy, like clauses that you guys have in the trust center and everything. And I thought, wow, you went through ISO certification, ISO 27001 and SOC 2 Type 2 certification, which is like a huge commitment and a huge undertaking. I do work with customers. Again, I'm not an auditor, but I do work with customers who have to get through that. And it's not just the technology, right? They're looking at your processes, your people, all the way down to like how you hire and fire people. And so, first of all, I'm just really impressed that you guys went through that process. And I think it's going to carry a lot of weight with, well, I'm curious your point of view and Jerry's on like, you obviously had to have some serious drivers to go through this, because these things are months long processes each.
I can share my perspective. One of those days when we Tommy, our COO, started when I started running out of hands, and he took like the like essentially everything about running the company to himself, and allowed me to live in Tahiti and just sip luxury margaritas. Like one of those days when he started, I was like this, since he had taken already all my work, and he was like, "Hey Ossi, I could do this sock thing. That could be pretty important for us long term, and it would enable us to more automatically like sell also these things because like people look at this compliance stuff. I was like, huh? Is it lunchtime? No? Oh, okay, never mind. Yeah, go ahead, do that suck thing. And that's how the whole thing went. And same then with the ISO 27K. But I think like what truly happened is two things. Tommy, our COO, is a very forward-leaning guy in these kind of things. Like he thinks of like how can this operation run as automatically as it can, including how people kind of purchase and get through compliance and stuff like that. That was very early on. He was like, I am going to automate this ship. You see, it's a nice startup that you guys have here, but it will never scale. And part of that scaling was compliance. And also like we have to, first of all, he also saw that from the get-go, we've had like pretty big customers land on our plate, and like it's hard for them to standardize unless we take our security and all of that seriously. And sure, we've done all that from the beginning, but how do you prove that to the customers? Like, yeah, hey, we have these like super experienced architects. Look at their CVs and stuff like that. That's not gonna work. You need standardized guidelines for that. And the second thing is, I think Tom is a bit masochistic by nature. So what you said about being a hell as an auditor and stuff like that, I think he secretly actually likes. He really likes getting things done the right way. That's what I'm trying to say. So dude, I had nothing to do with it. Tommy had everything to do with it, and boy was he right. Boy, did I know nothing about this when he started it. Absolutely, Jerry, over to you.
Yeah, my mind goes to prior to Hamina when I was actually doing Wi-Fi deployments. I was actually doing a lot of stuff in like hazardous type locations and environments. So I was dealing with class 1 div 2 type stuff on the hardware side of things, and then I come over to Hamina and they're talking about SOC2 type 2, and that was brand new to me. Like I'd never heard of this concept. But yeah, I mean, it's similar concept. If you've worked with like hazardous type equipment, it needs to be rated for certain environments, right, to be able to survive in that environment, operate safely in that environment. So similarly, from a security aspect, we need to have these kind of regulations in place, this auditing in place to make sure that we're doing our checks and balances to make sure we're protecting our customers' data and properly securing it, properly encrypting it. Not just while there's communication happening between your computer and the web, but what are we doing with it at rest? All these kind of things, which was all brand new to me. Like I had never worked with like cloud application stuff before. So that was all very, interesting to me. But it was also what was most interesting was, how many folks do kind of not almost require it. It's becoming more and more common of requiring it, but how much that kind of just ease that obstacle, right? It was, oh, you have SOC2 type 2. Okay, we can skip all the extra, forms that have to be filled out and all these different things, all these checks and balances, because you've already done that by having this SOC2 type 2 report that you can provide, and we can see that all these checks and balances are in place.
Absolutely. And yeah, to your point about Jen, I could see looking at it even just from the sidelines that it was quite a straining process. All of these were, but also like even though we had SOC 2 Type 2, and then we just did ISO on top of that, but that's seemed like maybe the most straining one as well. But I was initially this is a bit of a sidetrack, but I was initially concerned that this will tie our hands. We will lose our agility as a startup. We will lose some of our autonomy. Will we not be able to use the tools that we've always used? Very little impact. There is some impact, but I think it's impact where it makes sense. Even our like software architects, our security guys are like, yes, everything they have suggested, actually, none of it has been overkill. Pretty much all of it has been relevant and things that either they have already considered or they had not considered and they thought that it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is when you're a vendor like you guys or any vendor, there's all of, I mean, even if it's just like in my role before, right, as an integrator, there's all of these forms And sometimes, y'all, somebody once sent me like one of our healthcare, it was a federal healthcare customer that sent over a spreadsheet. They're like, oh, now we had been doing business and I mean like, designing and integrating their entire network infrastructure, their firewalls, their remote, everything in their environment. Like if it passed packets, we put it in. So they're like, oh, we're updating our vendor management system and we need you to fill out this vendor form. Anything that's security, comes to me. So I open it and it's a full freaking NIST 800-171, which is what a DoD contractor, right? That's what CMMC is based off of. So it's like what a federal contractor has to do. And it's hundreds of safeguards and, it's in a spreadsheet. And I'm like, I'm not filling this out. I'm not filling this out. And that's an extreme example, but a lot of the vendors, you get these requests and, maybe it's a 1-page form, maybe it's a 2-page form, but a lot of times it's a 20, especially if you're in the cloud, right? Because they want to understand if you're at, in Azure or whatever you're using, how are you
Yeah.
leveraging that? What types of data stores and databases, the encryption mechanisms for that. And so it's a lot deeper. And they may get into the processes and stuff, but yeah, filling out those forms every time they come up. And then to your point, I mean, every time I've gone through any type of formal framework or assessment, whether it's on the low end of stuff, like I think all network engineers, wired, wireless, should be familiar with things like the CIS controls, Center for Internet Safety. It used to be the SANS Top 20. It's 18 sets of controls, and there are things like asset inventory management, hardening certain parts of the infrastructure, things that we should be doing as
Yeah.
sysadmins and network admins. Um, and anytime I see those, and every time I've worked with those, there's always either this doesn't apply, right? Because we don't do this, or hey, we weren't doing that, or we were kind of halfway doing it, but it's not documented, and it's just that knowledge you have in your head, or it's something we weren't doing, but it's really easy to do, and you're like, yeah, that's a good idea. And I think all of these different audits and frameworks are like that. And it's not, they're not trying to get you. An auditor is not there. A good auditor is not there to try to hamstring you or knock you over the head or like catch you when you're doing something bad. A good auditor or an assessor is there to help you through the process and to help fill those gaps in a way that does let you continue to be agile with your business. And so I think if you get a
Agree.
good auditor or assessor, that's a cool, they're an ally, right? They're sitting on your side of the table, even though they're kind of, doing the inspection and grading your homework. They're your friend.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to your point on, maybe I'll use this. To your point, you asked like, how did we see this, and I thought I'd share also Tommy's perspective, because there was, um, I had somewhere up his slide deck as well. So let me try and find that real quickly, because it pretty nicely explained some of this stuff. Give me just a sec to try to find that. There we go. Then I'll try to share
And
my
then I'm
screen.
curious, like Jerry and UC, with you guys, when you were developing, because I've never done any type of product development, especially software. I'm curious, like when you moved into the cloud, how did you make the decisions? Now you ended up with something that was, flexible, agile, let you guys scale and secure things. I'm curious, like your thought process of picking the platforms and the tools you were using.
That's a good question. That's a good question. So coming back first to your, I'll get back to that.
Okay.
But why the compliance? So these were some of the reasons why we went there early on. But yeah, a lot of that has to do with building trust, and then that turning into like making business more quickly, and all of this stuff like about ISO 27K and all of that. This can be found. You mentioned our trust center, right, Jennifer? Somehow you ended up there.
Yeah. Because your email was like, here's our new stuff.
Oh, yeah, exactly right. So if you go to, is it trust.hamina.com or hamina.com/trust, you can actually download all the couple of hundred pages of SOC 2 Type 2 reports and 100 pages of ISO 27K and all of that. But it's all there against an NDA. So if you're considering that. But as to your question on the architectural choices, like you mean you previously mentioned Azure and all of that, right? So for example, why did we go to Azure? You haven't heard this story. Uh,
Me?
so when 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 we when I started humming, I hired the first ever employee, and he was like, "Yeah, I guess we need to set up this cloud thing." He said, "I've always done AWS, but like it would be also cool to learn something new. Why not?" And I was like, "Doesn't that affect our velocity quite a bit if you try to learn something new?" And he was like, "Ah, they're probably all similar." We actually went through a little bit of due diligence. He knew exactly how Azure worked, or sorry, AWS worked. He had worked always on AWS, not Azure. But yeah, but then I was like, I've heard Azure is pretty good. They might have some on-prem stuff that can be better than AWS, or so I had heard, whatever. And then we actually, some people from Microsoft helped us out on the due diligence, and then one of the leading Microsoft consultancies here in Finland, they have some like MVPs, Microsoft MVP, stuff like that. They helped us out as well a little bit because they are indirectly funding Hamina too. And then our first architect was like, yeah, why not? Why not? Let's use Azure. I've never done it, but it looks good enough, And at least at that point, their infrastructure as a code, for example, was better than AWS's. And granted, it was Azure was quite severely down last week for a couple of hours. I think it impacted like 40% of the web services online or something like that, including us. But overall, it's been good. I think that was maybe the most fundamental technology choice, and we have looked back in a sense that we are constantly evaluating, and we're doing some for example, AI training in other platforms as well, but we have stayed an Azure house. GPUs are from Azure, like databases, everything pretty much. But we did move, maybe Jen, I don't know if you know this as a security person, but we are moving our authentication platform from Microsoft B2C into Clerk. That's been like a pretty fundamental shift for us, and that's because it felt like Microsoft was kind of between two authentication platforms right when we needed to upgrade ours, and then there wasn't there wasn't that clear of a migration path to the next version from Microsoft, whatever it's Entra ID or something like that. So we took Clerk, which is an independent player, which also means that we are less reliant on uh, on Microsoft if we want to take on also Azure or AWS. Already the hardest piece of the puzzle, the authentication, has been moved somewhere else. Long story long. Sorry about that.
No, I think that's great because I mean the platform that you pick and the tools that you integrate with it really dictate what you can and can't do
Yeah.
from a security perspective. And I don't know if anybody's gone through an audit like these, but it's not a matter of them saying it's not like a checklist where it's like, hey, are you doing this thing, and then you go yes, or do you have a policy about this and you just go yes. Like they're actually testing it. They're getting in there and they're testing whether or not you have things configured the way you said you did, and whether or not automation workflows processes are happening the way that they're supposed to.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is not just that your infrastructure is robust, it's how you operate your business. Just today, the guys had their weekly security meeting, which is dictated by these things. Like we had to harden our physical security at the office because of these things. Like you said, even hiring, firing, road mapping the products, who gets to decide what gets implemented into the product, what is the like, how do we accept the features as part of the shipping product, these things like this. It affects everything, which makes me appreciate these actually more. They're pretty holistic.
Yeah.
So in terms of putting that aside for a while, let's do a sidetrack. And Jen, what do you think of like if we talk about Wi-Fi and security, and since in the Wi-Fi community you're known as the Wi-Fi plus security person, what are the kind of hot things, if you had to name one or two really topical things on wireless and security right now, and why, and what should we all know and do about those things?
I think the easy ones, the one I'm tired of hearing about and talking about is of course WPA3, but we have to get to WPA3 if we're going to use anything in 6 gigahertz and anything Wi-Fi 7. So I think we've got to figure that out. It's really the personal, like passphrase based networks that's the hold up with that. And shortened, condensed down is we're trying to get people to just go ahead and spin up another network, or more than one if you need to, and move things over to that and just leave the stuff that can't where it is. And in fact, in the training we've been doing, we're using Andrew Von Naj's beacon overhead calculator from like 10, 12, 15 years ago. But when you put it with modern data rates, if you're doing minimum like 6, 9, 12, whatever, what you see is like you can easily get 8, 9, 10, 12 SSIDs in the airspace without impacting performance. Now, I don't recommend you have 10 SSIDs unless you like something's happening. But that's the first thing, is we're trying to, push this forward a little more quickly. And the other thing is the Wi-Fi 7. So, the people that were in our training class and the people that were in our lab, and I didn't know really until we did the labs what we were going to find. So we had, and the talk I did there was like picking on all of the vendors, because everybody's Wi-Fi stuff, Wi-Fi 7 stuff right now is not actually behaving is Wi-Fi 7. So there's a list of like requirements that are mandatory for Wi-Fi 7, and the vendors are like across the board, they're not implementing that in their Wi-Fi 7 products. And so this idea of, oh, we already have, X number of, units or APs shipping, or X number of devices connecting on Wi-Fi 7, or, X percentage of adoption, all those numbers are just kind of complete rubbish, because those APs are not broadcasting the mandatory required settings for Wi-Fi 7, most of which have to do with the security suites. And so I think the other thing, that we're kind of trying to educate people about is, Wi-Fi 7 in a nutshell has those specific requirements like MLO. That can be, single radio. And that's the area like that I don't really, like when we get into Phi and what the RF is doing, like I don't work in that space. I'm sure Jerry could fill in that. But on the other side, with like what we're doing from the security perspective, Wi-Fi 7 requires, GCMP 256, which is the algorithm we use to secure that unicast traffic, like over the air between the access point and the endpoint. We've been using AES 128 for 20 plus years. And so a few weird things are happening, like endpoints that are capable should prefer a higher security with that 256, but they don't always. And so sometimes roaming between a Wi-Fi 7 capable AP and one that's not, it's like we're getting basically sticky clients again. And then the other thing is with that pairwise suite, because your Wi-Fi 7 AP is still going to service Wi-Fi 6 and prior clients, right? So it's still going to advertise AES 128. So now we have two pairwise cipher suites being advertised, and we have not had that since the TKIP days 20 some years ago. And that's not, part of the normal testing. So we've got a lot of little weird hurdles to work through that are going to look and feel a little bit like the WPA3 personal friction we've had going to Wi-Fi 7. And I think, the vendors have done us all a little disservice by not, coming out and being very transparent about what they do and don't have to, enabled. You have to just do a packet capture or use a tool like, Wi-Fi Explorer Pro or whatever, something you can see beacons with and see what they're actually advertising. And, the pairwise ciphers for that over-the-air encryption is one piece of it. I think it's probably the biggest piece of it. But there are other things like different AKMs, authentication key management suites that describe like how we authenticate and derive or distribute keys as well. So there's a whole can of worms related to Wi-Fi 7, and I'm concerned that people are gonna, not either they've already started putting some Wi-Fi 7 APs around, and because those Wi-Fi 7 APs are basically working like a Wi-Fi 6 AP, there's no issue. But at the moment that the vendors, rev up that code into full Wi-Fi 7 features, I think we're going to see issues with association. I think we're going to see issues with roaming, especially if they're commingled. And so that's kind of, and this isn't stuff like, I don't really do this as part of my day job. This is more just like educating the community and making sure that people have the right information to make the decisions.
And is there a risk then of vendors not ever making the leap to Wi-Fi 7, proper Wi-Fi 7 security? And
No,
just
I think they are. And I mean, especially since, I mean, and I think a few others got up at WLPC Prague and just kind of like poked at them a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and again, for me, it was equal opportunity offensive for all of the vendors, because all of the ones that I had captures from were doing the same, different variations of the same thing. But I think, some of the product managers that I've talked to have said they were, some by the end of October were planning to flip the switch. I don't know that the roadmap for everybody's, it's something I would ask your vendor about though. Are you running real Wi-Fi 7 or, fake Wi-Fi 7?
Wasn't there something with to entice people to move from TKIP to AES? Like, didn't some vendors, or maybe it was in the standard, I can't remember where it got implemented, but wasn't there like some performance impacts that were kind of artificially put in where, yeah, if you were using TKIP, it would be limited to only a certain megabit per second unless you moved to AES?
Now that I don't know about, but I do know that like the IEEE and the Wi-Fi Alliance both have aligned cryptographic capabilities with PHY and the standards over time. And so, the reason we had TKIP was we originally we started with nothing, and then we had WEP. And we immediately knew WEP was just horrible and failed and basically useless. But at that time, I mean, we're talking over 20 years ago, Wi-Fi products, people didn't go buy dozens, scores, hundreds, or thousands of APs. They would buy like 1, 2, and then you had to get the dongle to use it. So going to AES at that point in time was going to be a hardware, right? Cryptography is hard. Cryptography is hard processing wise. And so that was a hardware upgrade. And so TKIP was really just meant to be the stopgap between WEP and getting to AES 128, which was part of the robust security network 802.11i amendment that got rolled in, right, for security. So that was because if you went to people and you just paid all this money for these couple of new Wi-Fi things and nobody was doing Wi-Fi then, and you came back 8 months later when we knew WEP was broken and you said, oh, my bad, encryption doesn't work on this thing, buy all new stuff, that wasn't going to work. And they knew that Wi-Fi would not get adopted, right, and move forward if they did that. So TKIP was meant to be just a stopgap for, okay, we've already got this hardware out there. Let's make as much use of it as we can while we have to, and then get to 11i and get AES when we have new hardware. And that was what happened. But yeah, crypto is tied to the PHY in the standard. So I don't know all of the lines of what goes where, but that's also why, like in Wi-Fi 7, to do MLO, like there's specific cipher suites you have to use. There's specific AKM, you have to use AKM 24, things like that. So, if you see a Wi-Fi 7 network being advertised from an access point and it's advertising AKM 8, it's actually, and not 24, then you can only, you can only do single radio. So yeah, there's all that weird stuff where they've tied them together, and I don't know the details of that.
Got it. Hey, let's move on. We promised our audience some other topics as well, I think. And contrary to normal, I have some slides prepared, but a lot of this has to do with like how, at least I 4 or 5 years ago, I thought about cloud and these kind of cloud-based tools, that they would be inferior in a lot of ways. But it turns out like actually these, I don't, there might be people still who haven't used these, but I would say the performance is on par or actually typically better in browser-based Wi-Fi tools than what it is in desktop-based. Instant heat maps, like smooth 3D, like fully GPU accelerated. It just works phenomenally, and that's just because browsers are essentially like fully blown OSs these days. And again, most of the people we actually talk to, Jerry, is this fair to say that most of the people we talk to today still are using like desktop, like installable desktop tools today? So, so if they haven't experienced these cloud kind of tools, there's quite a big shift of like, I was just thinking, what's the difference? And I had to rewind back like 5 or 6 years when I was using desktop tools. But for example, like, not saving the project, never having to email somebody the project file or stuff like that, just instant sharing and never installing anything, and the tool just always being up to date. Like, I don't know if it's you guys, but I take this totally for granted these days. Like I had to seriously think on what the differences are.
I'd say the one that you're missing from this list that I actually hear quite often, which kind of surprises me, but I suppose it depends on the organization and stuff that you're in, is they actually like that it's in the cloud and runs in a browser, so they don't have to deal with local permissions, right? So the problem
Oh,
with like a local app is then they have to get it approved by like their IT to give like admin access or something like that to run like a local app. And yeah, that actually is a huge benefit. Is like, oh, it's in the cloud. I can just run in my browser. I don't have to go through like IT approval to get local admin rights and all this kind of stuff to the app. So yeah,
that's very
simplifies things quite a bit.
that's very true. But yeah, it was funny that I had to like scratch my head to try to remember. Uh, and then maybe this is what I learned that missed was like, what can one do with the APIs, and these kind of integrations to different systems, like automatic deployment and live network live analysis of networks, not just how it was planned and surveyed, but how it works live, and live testing of clients and stuff like that. Like that was unheard of. Like somebody told me that that's one of the use cases 4 or 5 years ago. I would have never thought of that. And does this happen to you, Jerry? Like when we talk about cloud-based tools, then people also assume that the site survey tool is also like browser-based. I get that quite a lot, and then they're a bit weary. That's what makes them weary. Like, but I don't want to use browser on my mobile to do the site surveys.
Well, and it makes sense when you think about it, because when you're doing a
Yeah.
site survey, you're often troubleshooting connectivity issues and things like that. So if your site survey solution requires internet connection, that is going to be a bit problematic.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And I guess the industry standard solution is then to just have the site survey solution as a fat application, in a way, as an app store app, which is exactly the route we took also from the beginning. Like
Yep.
it's not a mobile web browser based application. And yeah, you wouldn't be able to, yeah, you would need the internet if you use it on your browser. You probably could not connect to site survey devices. You couldn't use LiDAR. And here I'm promising now that our LiDAR functionality is coming February 26, for those of you who want to put my head on the chopping block. How about that? So I should have done some check mark emojis here and stuff like that, but since I only had 10 minutes before the start of the webinar to finish up the slides, I did not. But here's kind of the quick checklist of the Wi-Fi tool. Like, is it connectable to the cloud? does it integrate with you with your maybe your vendor? Is on-premises option possible if you're military, defense, defense contractor, like anything related to defense? Then you probably need an on-prem. Just so you know, we can also offer that. We can offer an on-prem solution as well. It will not come cheap at all, but it's possible to do, so that it never touches the internet and it runs on somewhere that we have no idea where it physically resides. That's a possibility. And I guess, like, call us slightly biased, but maybe the certs do kind of say that it's not just a couple of guys in a garage type of a cloud thing. It wasn't done by engineers born yesterday. We actually take it pretty seriously. And maybe, Jerry, you don't hear this EU US cloud thing so much, but I certainly do. In Europe, it's a big deal to have the cloud on European soil, and that it's not air gapped. What is it called when it's separated completely from the US cloud?
Ocean
Anyway,
gapped.
what's that?
I said ocean gapped. I'm not
Oh,
sure what the
ocean gapped.
terminology
Yeah,
is.
exactly. Ocean gapped.
I'm sure there's a technical term for that.
Ocean gapped. I'm making a note of that one. Miranda, write this down. This is
The things
that's
you learn
beautiful.
on the Hamina webinars.
Atlantic gapped, right? If it's between EU and US, it's Atlantic gapped, but if it's APAC versus US, it's Pacific gapped. Anyway, we have everything. We have Mediterranean gapped, Arctic Ocean gapped. No, we only have Atlantic gapped, ocean gapped cloud. So EU and US separately, and if you use the EU instance, no data goes to the US, which is a big deal around our neck of the woods. Anyway, anything we forgot? Then there's I think it's a big deal that especially the cloud-based Wi-Fi tools, they do integrate with your cloud-based Wi-Fi systems, but they do not just integrate with your cloud-based Wi-Fi systems. They also can integrate with your on-prem systems, such as Cisco Catalyst Center. As long as you open the port and you give Hamina your Catalyst Center IP, we can also show the live situation, live heat maps, live client troubleshooting of your Catalyst Center network as well, even though it resides on-prem on your NOC. But yeah, then if your Wi-Fi system never can ever touch the cloud in any way, then that would be a fully on-prem system, and then you would, obviously your Wi-Fi would be on-prem, and then your Hamina would be on-prem, and then yeah, it is possible. It is possible. So Jen, what do you think, like in terms of this whole small question, but if we look at like where's this whole cloud thing going to go, and is there what is the major shift? Are we done now? Now much of the stuff is in the cloud, and the way we see it is like pretty much everything else can be run on, for example, on Hamina, which is public cloud, on Hamina's public cloud, except military and defense. They are categorically out. Is this kind of where it ends? Like most of the stuff will run on cloud, military and defense will not, and then that's it? Or is there any additional trends in this kind of cloud migration of different tools, networking infrastructures, all of that kind of stuff? What happens next? We're already doing AI inference on the cloud, and is that it? Is this kind of how you foresee it going from here on out as well?
I mean, I think things will level out. The pendulum has swung back and forth for a little bit, but I think, both users, consumers and vendors have figured out that, if you do things in the cloud, you can leverage a lot of compute power that you are not going to get on-prem. And there's a lot of operational benefits and tracking benefits to running stuff in the cloud. So I think things will level out a little bit, and I think that there are some weird trends in terms of like news stories that may influence certain behavior adjustments a little bit. So, you know, most governments are, well, I don't want to say most governments, actually a lot in Europe are still kind of not in the cloud. In the US, actually, you know, we have a lot of stuff in the federal government, including DoD, in the cloud. Those are separate, you know, cloud instances. We have
That's
gov
like
specific.
right FedRAMP.
So, but you know, we see things like, you know, there was this whole kind of kerfuffle recently because it was uncovered that, you know, Microsoft was outsourcing the federal cloud management to engineers in China. And that was who was managing that infrastructure. And so like that's one example. There's 5 stories that are quite similar in different you know, different lenses, different views, but you know,
Yeah.
the idea of, you know, escalating tensions between different nation states and who has access to what, and is the only way we can be sure, you know, we have data sovereignty to pull it back in house. So I think there's going to be a little bit of shifting and shuffling, and maybe like that little shell game where you've got the cups, right? Um, but I think ultimately, because of the compute power we have access to in other people's clouds and other people's computers, I think that is the trend. You guys, I mean, you know, I know you've made a lot of progress since first developing the product, but I remember the first time I used your design tool in a web browser, um, you know, after listening to my computer and fans go pretty hard with a regular, like not cloud hosted tool. And you know, every time I used to manage, you know, a professional services delivery team, every time we had a, you know, wireless engineer come in, we had to like order specific laptops to make sure they could run the various design tools we were using throughout
Yeah.
time. And I'm not picking on any one vendor. This was all of them. There were 3 main products we used throughout the course of that time. So I was, you know, really interested to see how fast you guys could do certain functions. And what I realize, especially as you optimize, you know, some of that over time, is there's no way that could happen locally. Now, could an organization, you know, a lot of organizations, if they're doing, you know, AI projects, especially, you know, they're pulling some of that on-prem, and they do have the right compute power to run that. And I think that's great. And that's where I think we'll see things level out. I think, you know, AI will be democratized a little bit. People will bring some of that in-house a little bit. The rest of us who aren't going to run that type of infrastructure are going to keep using the cloud, and that's where we're going to go.
Yeah. And I think it's already in this compute power thing, like we've pulled quite a bit of compute actually to the local laptop, and same might happen with AI over time as well. All of our AI happens in the cloud today, but as the large language models and things like that get smaller and smaller and better and yet are still smaller, there might be at some point that, you know, some of
Oh
that
yeah.
also runs
Well,
on our.
I mean, we have AI chips, right? We have
Yeah,
processors that are going into
exactly.
laptops. So yeah, if that's there, absolutely you're going to make use of that.
Exactly. But even for like pretty hard stuff like what we do, it might be we don't do anything locally yet, but just might. I mean, these are very powerful computers that we're using as laptops. Like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, these would have been supercomputers. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But it's often like, yeah, first everything shifts one way, and then like pragmatically we'll shift it back, and yeah, whatever.
I did
I,
have, I'll tell this really quickly. I had a customer who, this is a long ago and far away, but they, what, you know, when cloud was first the thing, right? They were like, cloud, move everything to the cloud. They were a large organization that was growing rapidly through acquisition and very prominent in the United States. And so they got everything to the cloud, and then they got their first like 3 months of bills, and then they were like, "Yep, nope, back." they
yep, yep,
moved. They
yep.
moved 2/3 of their data center back to a shared colo facility. So you do have to be intentional about what you move that you're paying from that
Exactly.
model, right?
Exactly, and especially now because of AI, like at least for us, it's a pretty conscious effort on optimizing kind of the AI inference, and there's a lot of companies right now that are losing a lot of money. They have a lot of flashy AI stuff, but they're absolutely like throwing money at the GPUs, and
Yeah.
that's not sustainable either. It is very analogous to this like cloud example. Now it's just like it's not just cloud compute and storage; it's actually AI. That's the lost driver for many. But agreed. Um, sorry about that. Oh, now I lost my voice. First Jen, then Jerry, now me. Over to Andrew. Any final words from the chat before we run over?
You got Jen's virus somehow through the air, you see, impressive.
Yeah, it's a computer virus.
Yeah, but Jen's done a great job actually answering some of the stuff she saw go by. The only thing I think the audience would probably really appreciate is a couple of guys asked, is transition mode safe to use? Because there was some rumors early days that it wasn't.
Oh, I put a long explanation about why operationally why you so on an enterprise network, you're good. Do it. Have fun. On a passphrase network, there's two problems, and I put a long explanation in the chat window. But short version is one of the reasons is especially I would say uncertified endpoints, which a lot of the cheap IoT stuff is, ones that are like not certified or older or just haven't been updated. There's a lot of reasons they may not connect to a transition mode network. So the two AKMs, an AKM they don't understand, protected management frame flags, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If they were operating to spec, that would not happen. But there's a lot of endpoints not tested and certified. So that now from the security perspective, you've basically just downgraded everything to WPA2 because you're using the same passphrase on a transition mode network. So, the WPA2 passphrase is super easy to crack over the air passively. There's no indicator that somebody has done that. And so what you've just done is, somebody can still do that and they can join the network with the passphrase that they cracked. And they probably then have adjacency to the rest of things on that network or other parts of your network, which is why, I'm a big fan of peer isolation on Wi-Fi. Check that little box that says don't let things talk to each other directly, especially on a WPA 2 passphrase or any passphrase based network. There's a long list of reasons why a WPA3 transition mode on a passphrase network won't work. But on an enterprise, you should just do transition mode and then make sure everything is happy and then move to full WPA3 and then move on with life.
We did have a question come in. I know we're a couple minutes over already, but if we can maybe try to answer this one from Nick. Having a 360-degree view of the network could help us to manage our networks better. Would it be hard to be compliant with these security controls while extending the instrumentation of the Wi-Fi network to individual endpoint devices within organizations? I guess the way I kind of interpreted that, and Nick, tell me if I'm wrong here, would be like if you're thinking about like adding like sensors and things like that to the network as additional like data points for kind of managing the network, giving you that visibility. Yeah, can we still apply these I guess security compliant types regulations requirements to these sensors?
Is it from our perspective, from the Hamina perspective, kind of
I suppose we can look at it from that side of it.
The SOC 2 ISO that covers the Hamina suite of products. So any external ones would need their own certs.
And I suppose maybe Jennifer, from your perspective of if you're going to be adding things like sensors and things like that to the network, what's your thoughts on that from like a security aspect? Is that another vulnerability, to the network, or can we properly secure those endpoints as well?
Yeah, so I think if Nick's question really has to do with like, could you incorporate other telemetry, especially because you guys have like live view, or maybe you were talking, Nick, you're talking about a Wi-Fi vendor or a tool. So extending instrumentation of the Wi-Fi network to individual endpoint devices. So there have been several vendors that have had like things you could install on endpoints to kind of, instead of doing synthetic testing, to do kind of like real endpoint testing. There's also all the synthetic tools. So I think the question that, as I'm taking this, would be, the answer would be, what is the data that's being collected, and what is, so every organization that has any type of risk management should have a data labeling policy. I'm sure if Hamina has done a SOC 2 Type 2 and an ISO certification, they know, and they have data labeling processes in place. So it would be, if somebody else, if you or somebody else is collecting that data, it is, what is the value or risk of that data, and then you put a data label around that, and then you secure it appropriately. So that could mean that what they're already doing with, whether it's a tool or a vendor, what they're already doing with encryption and storage and transmission is perfectly fine. It could be that there's certain types of data or certain types of environments where the user might want to disable that, or the vendor may need to have some additional kind of like checks related to authorizing that, because there could be liability for the vendor holding that information. So yeah, it just depends on what is that data and what is the risk associated with it. If because so all of these different, like GDPR, there's not an audit for GDPR. You can get somebody to assess you against your practices for that, but there's not an audit. However, if you violate it, same thing with like HIPAA in the US with healthcare data. If you violate it, there are fines associated with that. So it could be that, a vendor looks at it and says, okay, well, if this data is leaked, stolen, breached, whatever, and it's customer data of this nature, do we have like disclosure requirements and or fines we have to pay related to that? In which case that's going to change your decisions around storing that data or how you secure it. And then
Anything else
I saw
on the
Kit's question around WPA3 and like MPSK, PPSK, DPSK, UPSK, IPSK, whatever the vendors call it, multiple pre-shared key. No, that has not been resolved, sadly.
anything else, or should we actually end this before we are 30 minutes over, like which is normal normal with Jen? Thank you everybody for joining. If there's any other questions, if you're into Jen's excellent courses, her book, her you're also a dancer, right? So dance lessons, where should they again find you?
Oh, I think LinkedIn. I'm trying to keep stuff up on LinkedIn. Mastodon is the other place, or well, Blue Sky and Mastodon are the other kind of like Twitter replacements I've been using. But yeah, LinkedIn, and then feel free to connect or follow or do whatever you want to do there, and stay in touch. And happy to connect with everybody. Happy to see you guys. Thanks for having me.
Good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'll see you face to face next time in Phoenix, I believe.
Yep. Hopefully.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Miranda, for setting everything up. Another home run when it comes to technical arrangements and the guest. Otherwise, a fairly subpar performance from us Hamina people as always. All good. Thank you so much, Jen, for joining. I'll talk to you later.